My name is Connor Quinlan, and in this review I'm going to be doing a comparison between the Nikon d40, the Nikon d40x, and the Nikon d80, which is the camera I have right here. First I'm going to start out with comparing the Nikon d40 and the d40x and going over some of the pros to that camera. First of all, there of course is not much of a difference between the Nikon d40 or the d40x. The d40 has a 6 megapixel sensor, whereas the d40x has a 10 megapixel sensor. That's the main difference you're going to see between the two cameras. There is another small difference, and that is with frames per second. The d40 shoots at 2.5 frames per second, whereas the d40x shoots at 3 frames per second. Now that's not much faster, but it is worth noting. Now I'm going to go over some of the pros of the d40 and the d40x. First thing that you're going to notice, of course, is how small the bodies are. They're very small, lightweight, compact, and definitely easy to use. For instance, if you look at the d80 here, you'll notice that it has tons of controls all over the body. The d40 and the d40x do not have this many controls, and the controls are a lot easier to decipher. It's a great camera for people who are moving up from a compact camera. It's very user-friendly. It also has scene modes, like you see on the d80 right here, that helped people moving up from a compact learn how to use the SLR camera. Now I'm going to be comparing those two cameras against the d80 body. Now the first thing that you're going to notice, of course, is how much larger the d80 body is. It's also heavier too, but it's not that much heavier, but it is quite a bit larger. The good thing about the d80 is that it is much better built. Even though they are both plastic, the d80 is definitely more durable. Also, if you look around the body, you'll also notice that the d80, like I said, has several more buttons and features on the outside of the camera body. And I'm going to go over some of the buttons that the d80 has that the d40 and the d40x do not have on the outside of the body. First of all, if you look up here, you've got your metering button up here, which is this button here, which lets you choose between spot metering, center weighted metering, and the whole matrix metering system. The d40 and the d40x are also missing a shooting style button, which is here, which lets you choose between single frame shots, continuous shooting, remote shooting, timed shooting, many things like that. The d40 and the d40x also do not have a function button at all. They are completely missing this button. This is one of the most useful buttons I find on the d80 body. It lets you choose between several different functions. The d40 and the d40x also miss several of these buttons that you find right here. They do have 3 going down the side here, but the d80 definitely, those buttons on the d80 can do a lot more. For instance, it has an ISO button, which right here, which lets you view and change the ISO. Has a white balance button right up here. It also has a quality button here. Those are some of the buttons that you will not find on the outside of the d40 and the d40x. Also, the d40 and the d40x are missing some functions completely. Like, for instance, I already showed you one is the function button. It doesn't have one of those. They also don't have a depth of field button, which can be very useful as well. And also another feature that you'll be missing is a bracketing button. Those are some of the features that you'll get with the d80. Now I'm going to go over some of the more major features that the d80 has over the d40s. One of the major ones is the autofocus system. This one has an 11-point autofocus system, whereas the d40s had a 3-point autofocus system. The advantage of having more autofocus points is that you can choose many different areas in the frame, and the autofocus in this camera is much more precise and quicker as well. The startup time and the speed of the d80 is also a lot faster, not really in frames per second, but like I said, in startup time, blackout time, playback time, things like that. Let me give you an example. For instance, the startup time for the d80, it starts up in 0.1 seconds, which is really fast, whereas the d40 starts up in about 0.9 to a second, which is considerably a lot longer than the d80. And like I said, the d80 will also have much shorter blackout time after you take the picture. If you look back here, you've got your viewfinder here. Now on the d80, you're going to have a much brighter and clearer viewfinder than you would on the d40 or the d40x. And that's due to the d40 and the d40x smaller size. Alright, and also If you look at the body here, the D80's got a little feature up here. Its top LCD screen, and as you can see, it displays all the different settings that the camera is on. Now the D40 and the d40x do not have this feature, but instead they display all their information on the rear LCD screen back here. Now the D80 does not have that feature, and the advantage of having it on the rear LCD screen is that you can take pictures on a tripod and you can view your information a lot easier than looking up here at the top LCD screen. Even so though, the top LCD screen does have its advantages. It's easier to view in really bright light especially. The D40 and the d40x do not have an internal autofocus motor, which is the mechanism that focuses certain lenses. Because of that, they cannot use several Nikon lenses. For instance, they cannot use any non-AFS or non-AFI lenses. If you put those lenses on the D40 or the d40x, they will only be manual focus. With the D80, you can use any Nikon lens and it'll work great all the way from 1986. Now I'm going to go over, there's a couple minor features here that are different between the cameras. The first one is that the D80 has a little bit of a broader ISO range. The D40 and the d40x have an ISO range of 200 to 3200, whereas the D80 has one from 100 to 3200. A 100 ISO can come in handy sometimes if you want a little bit less noisier pictures. A big thumbs up for the D40 and the d40x is that they have a faster flash sync. They have a 1/500th of a second flash sync, whereas the D80 has a actually pretty slow 1/200th flash sync. Like I said, the weight is also considerably different. The weight of the D80 is about 1.2 pounds, whereas the D40 and the d40x weigh considerably less than a pound. Now, one of the largest differences between the cameras, of course, is the price. Now, the D80, just the body itself, costs about $800. The D40 with a lens costs just under $500, and the D40x with a lens costs a little over $600. So as you can see, the D80 is considerably more expensive than both of those cameras. And for the price, the D40 and the d40x are definitely the winners. You get a lot more in the D40 and the d40x for the price that you pay with those. However, if some of the D80's useful features sound useful to you, then you might want to consider paying the extra couple $100 for the D80 body. Some of the things that I would buy the D80 over the D40 or the d40x for are its better autofocus system. Also, the fact that this camera can take all Nikon lenses was definitely worth the money for me. And also, several of the features on this camera I found very useful. For instance, the bracketing, the function button, and the depth of field button. They are very useful to me. I use them all the time, so that was definitely worth the money for me as well. Things that I would not buy this camera for over the D40 and the d40x is the faster startup time and the brighter viewfinder, and also the top LCD screen. Things like that, they are somewhat useful every now and then, but it's definitely not worth the extra $100. The autofocus, the build quality, and also the better features were definitely worth the money though. But remember, those features that I mentioned were worth it to me. Now, whether or not they're worth it to you all depends on how badly you need those features. If you don't want to pay the extra money for them, then by all means go for the D40 or the d40x. But if those features sound useful to you, then I would definitely buy the D40. And this has been a comparison between the Nikon D40, the Nikon D40x, and the Nikon D80.